I'm Garrett McQueen.
I am the ever woolly Scott Blankenship. I need a beard trim in a huge way, man.
And this is TRILLOQUY, conversations that challenge the status quo of classical music. Scott's feeling woolly today. All right. My hair, I think we're all looking a little, as the world begins to open up, a little prematurely, if you ask me. But as the world begins to open up and folks are starting to come back outside, we're all seeing how feral we look.
And seeing everything that we bought on Amazon.
Yeah. I've been, actually Amazon put a stop to a lot of that, because they were only really putting priority on the gloves and the masks and stuff. And for other things, you had to wait. And I didn't want to wait a week for my stuff, but I'm going to tell you, I got into Wayfair.
Oh, okay.
That futon you're sitting on came from Wayfair.
Yeah, you finding some stuff? What else you found?
I mean, all sorts of paintings. Both of those paintings, I ordered so much from Wayfair. They gave me like a random $100 gift card. They're like, "All right, girl, calm down."
Okay, so between the stuff that you're getting on Wayfair and all the music gear that they see in the background at my place, we should get some. We should get some corporate mentions for that.
Yeah, this episode of TRILLOQUY, this opus of TRILLOQUY, is brought to you by Wayfair. We've got just what you need. Okay, anyway, let's check our accidentals. So last time we were talking about, what we're continuing to talk about, the death of George Floyd and the police brutality and the Black Lives Matter protests, all of that sort of thing. And I talked about how, Governor Waltz and Mayor Fry of Minneapolis, I thought they were doing a pretty decent job. And, I'm not here necessarily to take that back, but we need to really, take what these politicians are saying seriously. All of the protesters and the organizers are really holding their feet to the flame. And it's kind of become national news about Mayor Fry being dismissed, I'll say, from one of these protests. They basically asked him yes or no. Are you in support of defunding the police? And he had to say no,
There was a huge pause, too.
And, they just started booing him. He had a long walk of shame. They even started yelling, "Shame, shame, shame,"
Yeah,
like in Game of Thrones.
That's how long it was. Yeah.
It was hard to watch, but, I appreciate the organizers and the protesters really, not being shy about, really wanting to enact change and holding these elected officials to the fire. So I'm going to add a little natural there. I still think that they're doing a great job, more than I could do, but I'm sorry that I can't just 1000% back him now, because that is not really the answer that the crowd wanted to hear. And if I may be honest, not the answer that I wanted to hear either.
Oh, say more about that. I'm interested.
I mean, think about defunding the police and restructuring the system to where we aren't afraid or nervous if we're approached on the street or if we're pulled over. Think about that reality. Think about not really worrying about the cops if you happen to be outside with a joint or something. That's a reality I'm interested in. I mean, what if someone asked you that question about defunding the police?
Well, in my neighborhood, people are not quick to call the police. They tend to try to resolve things on their own.
And why? Why do you think that is?
Well, the old school East Siders are notorious scrappers. They
know how to fight.
They like to fight, and they're not. They would, if they caught somebody getting into their car, like a couple houses down, they've got an axe handle by the door, and they run people down. They don't. They keep going after them.
Street justice.
Yes. So,
and that's actually, that's an interesting point, because something I read, I think on Twitter or something earlier today, was the idea that calling the police, for help is a privilege that not everyone has.
That's the next thing that I was getting to.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, because, there's lots of black and Hmong neighbors that I have no reason to believe that they have any deep trust right now. So, especially while the lockdown was happening and all those curfews and all that sort of thing, man, just gunshots all the time, helicopters, sirens, all that.
Well, so anyway, that's my quick natural, but my main accidental for this week was a flat. I watched something that sort of fell flat for me. Even though I had a lot of laughs, was the movie The Birdcage. Now, you were telling me that you're familiar with the play.
Le Cage aux Faux.
Okay, tell me about your. Well, first of all, for folks who don't know that story, the movie or the play, basically in a nutshell, what is the Birdcage about?
It's about two gay men that are essentially trying to figure out how to tell their children that they're in a
Oh,
relationship.
and Happy Pride Month, by the way. That's why I brought this up.
There we
Well,
go.
that's why. So it's Pride Month for June. In
Hmm.
addition to Black Music Appreciation Month, so a lot of the channels are shouting out Pride Month with the gay movies, I suppose. So the Birdcage was on as I was flipping channels and decided to just kind of stick with it. So
Well,
so any,
when it came out, when that film came out, that was on the edge because
right,
it
because
was
they
normal,
had gay men.
and it was normally the kids that were trying to figure out how to talk to their parents about it, not
Well,
parents.
and that's why I'm bringing that up today. So as we're moving forward, talking about being anti-racist as a society and trying to do better, it's interesting to go back and see a movie like that doesn't really address race as much as it addresses sexual identity, and how not that long ago, you had a whole movie about code switching. Basically, that's what the movie is about. One or both of the gay men trying to come off as such and such for the rich, powerful parents whose their son is trying to marry, and all of that. Anyway, like I said, lots of laughs, but just kind of just didn't age well.
Yeah.
And when we talk about this, I think about a conversation we had on Triloquy way back when one of those movies, they were in Ireland and they called themselves the N words of Europe, or the
The
black
commitments.
people of
Yeah, they're,
Europe.
yep.
Yeah, just how certain movies and certain things don't really age well. So
I see that now, but also keep in mind that when I was watching that in my late teens, early 20s, it solidified something that I had already thought, which was you are never going to be as good at this as a black person. That's kind of
sure.
what they were, that I, it was, you can try to be Aretha Franklin and Otis Redding and James Brown. You're not going to get there. And that was part of for me, that was part of the humor. I mean, I totally see what the point that you made about it, but
So
it was,
with that, being said, I'm wondering, and you're being a little older, I'm sure that your opinions on things have shifted and evolved.
hmm
What do you think are some of the just common things as we're trying to turn the page now, that aren't going to age so well? Maybe a movie that's out now, or
Oh,
a
good
lot of stuff
question.
probably.
I don't think the Transformers films are going to age
Oh,
very
why that?
well. I don't know. I don't know. It's just a bunch of noise.
Hmm.
I'm really looking forward to, there's some art being created right now. There's some things being written right now about the situation that we're in.
Yeah.
That's going to be some really powerful theater, some really powerful music. So
Some things that will age well.
that will age well.
Yeah.
As far as what won't, I'm maybe The Office.
Really. I mean, there's some semi-problematic things
Yeah,
in there,
yeah.
and
So,
I mean, even the way they deal with sexuality,
yeah.
the whole Oscar saga and all that. I mean, that would be a horrifying experience as far as being out, and and HR, what in the show, gives them 3 months paid vacation, or to keep them from suing and all that. I don't know.
3 weeks, 3 months.
I thought it was 3 months.
Oh, is that what you said? All right. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Oh yeah, because they went to Europe.
they went to
Remember?
Europe. Yep.
Anyway, shout out to the Office. So anyway, happy Pride Month. As you go back and watch the old gay movies like the Birdcage. I don't know. I don't mean to shit on the Birdcage. Shit in the Birdcage. Because I got lots of like out loud laughs watching the movie. And I think I'd watched it all the way through kind of once before, but kind of paying attention to what it was, seeing the pastels and the electric lights of
Yeah.
Palm Beach.
I would never survive. Can you see me down there with this beard?
It wouldn't quite work, but you'd be popular at the Birdcage, I'm sure.
Thanks.
Also, okay,
Appreciate.
so you're not playing anymore. Okay.
Appreciate.
Also, now you're serious.
Did you see my face? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Anyway, so what you feeling this week as far as accidentals?
Do you remember when you came in on Thursday and I really um, didn't have much to say?
Sure. Oh
Because,
yeah.
man, I'm sure that every single um, Zoom meeting that you have right now with people in these largely white institutions, you're starting to have the conversation about what do we do
Yeah.
to, and so, and I'm hearing them and I hear other people talk about them and I'm going,
What are we
God,
doing to be less racist? You know.
right. And I'm just thinking it's just, my biggest fear right now is if anything really can be done. If is it too late? Is it too late?
Well, what kind of? I guess this is sort of sharp for you. You're having a sharp reaction to thinking about these things.
Yeah.
I was on a sort of digital panel over the weekend, and there was this guy in there, a white man in on the discussion, kind of mirroring some of the things that you were talking about on Thursday. Really realizing, that in many ways you're a part of the problem. And what does it mean to be a part of an institution that has held up X, Y, and Z? So he was this man was voicing some of those things, and talked about how when he rode in the car with his grandparents and they used certain language, how he never spoke up or never said anything. And thinking back, how he feels that he was complicit, how he was no better than his grandparents using that language, for not saying anything. We've seen the protest signs that say silence is violence, right?
Right.
I,
So
I
all
I
of
wonder if there was some of that in there for you.
there was, and if you listen to Classically Black podcast, Delaney talks about how she had her breakdown because everything was just piling up and
Right.
stacking up and everything. And for me, it was just like, wow, okay, 30 years I've been announcing this music and sidestepping this. Or even in the last podcast where I said, I feel like my role is kind of like, hey, look over here. Wrong. Okay, that's not the stance that I need to be taking. And it all stacked up. And I thought, I've done this for 30 years. I have enabled this for 30 years, either out of my own ignorance or my own fears for people who had money. That's where I was landing. And so I didn't feel very good. I felt one of the lowest that I've felt in recent years. And you know that I go up and down with depression, So Thursday was just a heavy, heavy night. I mean, nothing like Jacob Fry. They should have put him on suicide watch after that walk.
He
You
needed.
know,
I mean, I'm sure he went home and just took a nap.
oh my
After
God.
that, you just need to go lay down.
Oh my goodness.
After a whole crowd boos you and you have to walk away through the
You
crowd.
drew them.
Yeah, look up the video. Y'all heard some of the audio at the beginning of this. But so, I mean, when it comes to that, first and foremost, you're feeling that way. So you care more than a lot of people. What kind of pulled you out? I mean, you're not seeming so down today.
I have to sit with it. I'm processing it. What can I say? I think that realizing that it happened is a big step.
Yeah.
Number one is just to go, oh shit. Okay. Because then once you see it, and you and I have talked about this before, as a white person, when I realize a little bit of privilege that I've got, just because you realize that you have it there doesn't mean that all the rest of it falls off.
Yeah.
Okay. You're still going to find instances.
Yeah.
And I think that that's just something that I had to work through. And as a result, now I'm thinking about ways that I can begin to transform my on-air presentation to talk about these things that in a way that lines up with what people are used to from me.
I mean that you have a platform, right?
Right,
Yeah,
right,
and y'all know how I give it up
right.
every night, But what if and you acknowledged once that between the two of us, on it used to be 3 nights a week, but 2 nights a week, half of the day is us,
Right.
So what if half of the day folks were listening to classical music and hearing things that would, click switches in their mind when it comes to the anti-racism that is, that we're hoping to spread across society. The opportunity is there at all times.
Yeah. See the way that I've been doing it the last couple nights is just full on acknowledging I'm not 100% sure yet how to talk to you about this. But I've been pointing people to the seven last words of the unarmed because
Right.
there's a link through the website. So I'm pointing a lot of people there. And also just talking about, look up Joel Thompson and Adrian Dunn, like from the last Opus. Those are low hanging fruit, I know, but these are my first steps in what I'm sure is going to be a lifelong journey.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, your work here is
I can get the look on your face is like I'm not sure how to get us out of that one, but thank you.
well, before we close out, is this still the opening movement? Oh yeah, it is. Okay, so before we close out movement one, you showed me a photo that you saw, or a little thing you saw on Instagram that said,
White
"White
tears
tears
are
are
violent.
violent." This idea of the white guilt not really helping, and even as far as
Yeah, so
it's if you're not helping, you're against. So
so I doubled down.
as you've continued to sort of think and process, what are your thoughts on that idea now? White tears are violent.
I forget what you said to me there in the studio that kind of subdued those feelings, but Garrett, I have to say that right now I'm still stuck in a spot where I don't know what to say about it yet.
Yeah.
It's still a log jam of ideas that I'm trying to process and come to grips with on my own.
even as
So
even as someone who without trying to give you the good white person trophy, in many of the conversations we've had on and off the mic, it seems like even since you were a kid, a teenager, there were certain things that you just did not do that have proven to have been on the right side of things. the
thank
the the,
goodness.
the way the high school girls were treated, the way folks would use the FAG word,
Oh
things like
man,
that.
yeah, yeah.
So I think it's good that, I don't know, you're at least thinking about it, and not proclaiming yourself to have already have done what you needed to do, and
No, I'm not. I'm not woke. I'm about as woke as somebody who got up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom. That's how woke I am. But
and you
and
and you have to make sure you're awake, otherwise you. Okay, and we're back with movement two. Time for us to strike a chord. So, this week, Scott, it's really just something how everything works. So I'm gonna shout out my friend Caesar Savetta. He lives up in New York. We're working on an initiative up there, but we spent a long time on the line talking about Paul Robeson, who I'm
hmm
sure we're going to bring up on the podcast, in the future. But another name that came up was Scott Joplin, and we talked a lot about how folks think of him as the light piano composer, but he was actually a serious composer. Wrote an opera that for all intents and purposes was just thrown in the trash, and no one really paid attention to Tremonisha until someone revived it, and working on all that anyway. But one conversation that we kind of got into was someone who Joplin was kind of in musical cahoots with. So these days, the name a lot of people are saying is Derek Chauvin, right? You know, the man who had his knee on George Floyd's neck. Well, Scott Joplin was around a guy named Louis Chauvin. You know, it's something
Was it
how
spelled the same?
spelt the same and everything. I believe,
Weird.
yes, Chauvin, and it's just nuts how things connect in that way. So basically, we talked about this guy, Louis Chauvin, who played rags and light piano music just like Joplin, but couldn't really read music or write it down. So Joplin had to do a bit of that for him. So the famous story is that he was sitting at the piano playing this thing. But before his sickness, which we'll talk about in a second, was getting the best of him, and he couldn't play anymore. So Joplin helped him write down this piece of music that we now call the Heliotrope Waltz. And I didn't know what a heliotrope was. It's a sort of flower. So that's just what they called it. And of course, with the flowers, you have your double entendres there, and all that sort of thing. So if you're listening right now, look up and read a little bit about Louis Chauvin, and his relationship with Scott Joplin was really interesting. And we're talking about Black Music Appreciation Month. I think a lot of people know Joplin, but Louis Chauvin is another one of those names that we need to add into the Rolodex. But what I wanted your thoughts on, Scott. So one of the famous stories between Joplin and Chauvin was a piano competition they took place in. They participated in, that was in a what's the nice way to say
A
whorehouse? A
brothel.
brothel. Okay, I forgot. So it went down in a brothel, and it's actually syphilis that ended up taking Chauvin out, but Joplin as well. That was sort of the
Didn't
thing.
everybody have it? I
Well,
mean,
so that's what I was gonna ask you. Like we think of these composers as X, Y, and Z, but we never talk about the more nefarious things that they've participated in. I mean,
I do.
would you see your well you bring up those conversations on the radio?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
you say such and such had syphilis.
Yep.
Okay, and how does that connect? What's your argument as far as that being an important part of the story or the music or whatever?
Because I think that there is a tendency to think of people who have STIs as dirty or have unscrupulous personalities, things like that. Back in the day, you just had syphilis. You just, I
Not
mean,
everybody.
well, if you were having sex, chances were really high, but it was prevalent,
Sure.
you know?
That's an interesting point you've made. I didn't think about it as far as sort of getting rid of the stigma. Um,
Just say it.
yeah, yeah. Oh, that's interesting. Okay, I'll have to approach it from that lane in the future, because I tend to ask the question. Would we have been? Well, I wouldn't have been in those brothels. I don't need to be close to anyone's heliotrope. But
Oh
do you
no.
do you feel like you would have been hanging out in a brothel with Joplin and Chauvin in them? First of all, these were black establishments, so you had to have really been down to. I mean, we cool now. I don't know if you would have been up in the what were the and they have fun names, the Shake Shack and you know the piano key. I don't
The
know,
Bunny Ranch.
but do you feel like you would have been in there in the brothels with all the other men in those days?
Man, I probably. What? You want an honest answer? Or do you want me to, try to make up something to make myself seem like I'm sweet? What? I don't know. Maybe.
Okay.
What? It's possible.
Do you think all of those rags would have helped you get in the mood, I suppose? It's just interesting that music was in that setting, huh? And when we try to completely sanitize it these days, don't we?
It's like we have with everything else.
Yeah.
Do talk about Handel and Delius, right? With
Oh
their
yeah, I forgot I wrote that thing.
their
Yeah.
their proximity to the slave trade, right?
Hmm.
So what are we missing if we just took them out of the library? I mean, seriously.
And added in Louis Chauvin and his Heliotrope Waltz. See?
Good.
Stuck, pull other things out and stick him in. Okay, that's it for the double
All
entendres.
right.
So anyway, so look up Louis Chauvin. Maybe we'll actually get into movement 3 if we can find a recording of the Heliotrope Waltz. But for this take a stand movement. So far we've given a shout out to Pride Month, and we're talking about Black Music Appreciation Month. So maybe about 6 weeks ago, I had a conversation with a woman named Alicia Waller. She has a new album out called Some Hidden Treasures. Really beautiful music. After you get done listening to that Chauvin, look up Alicia Waller and Some Hidden Treasures. We have a conversation about Black music, her process, its connection to so-called classical, and everything in there. So let's listen to a little bit of some old school Black rags here for a second, transitioning, leaving the brothel here, and finding some different hidden treasures, some more wholesome hidden treasures.
There he is.
Alicia, thank you so much for joining me here on TRILLOQUY.
Hey, Garrett, how's it going?
It's going well. You have a beautiful name. You share a name with my mother, so it's especially an honor for me to speak with another Alicia.
I am honored.
We were connected by your manager Tim, and you're a part of Innova Records. I don't actually think that I've talked that much about Innova here on TRILLOQUY. From your perspective, what is it like being a part of that label? Do you perceive it as being different than some of the others out there?
Absolutely. One of the best things about Innova, I'd say, is that they make space for us genreless artists. That's one of the things that they lean on and they advocate. When I was making the rounds to finding a home for my music, the fact that I kept coming back, I kept hearing, I don't know how to sell it. I don't know how to sell it, because everything tends to be so segmented.
Yeah.
Especially with like American consumerism in music, especially. But Innova does an amazing job of making a home, or offering a home to those of us that have no home, and are interested in exploring boldly.
Wow, yeah, and shout out to again to Tim for connecting us. Now, you said a home for genreless music, which is really interesting. Most of the folks and most of the music we talk about on this podcast fall under that classical umbrella. And I know that you have some classical training, but you wouldn't necessarily categorize your music as classical, or would you?
No, I wouldn't. In part because of my extremely strict training in classical music, it's hard for me to call it that. Of course, the tonality, it's a Western tonality that I'm playing with. So there's an argument that it could be defined as classical music. But to me, what I'm making and what I'm interested in is soul music. And when kind of conceiving of the album and conceiving of the compositions, I was also very interested in jazz and Afro-Americana, and also some global touches as well. So I would give it a home in soul, because the heart is what is principally important to me. And also give some credit to jazz as well.
Yeah, so with soul being the principal genre that you connect your music to, it seems it goes without saying that Blackness in your music is very important to you.
Absolutely.
How does that manifest in your process? How do you apply your identity when you sit down to think of a few lyrics or try to put some notes together?
Yeah, there's a number of ways in which I am interested in addressing my identity as a woman of color in my music. Of course, there's the lyrical component, which I like to incorporate very subtly, but very intentionally. And then there's also the musical structure. I was very interested in kind of incorporating just black harmonies and black the things that I grew up on, the bass line, a very strong rhythmic bass, and also vocally playing with rhythm myself, falling behind the beat. That's a very vernacular choice to make when singing music that is, described as black music.
Yeah.
And then what else? What else would I say?
I mean, when you talk about falling behind the beat, you're
Uh,
reminding me of something that a couple of my teachers used to say, having the courage to wait,
mm,
and not being right there on top of it. And that's definitely an integral part of black music as I see it.
yeah.
And I would love to jump in to how that applies to your latest project specifically. But before we get there, I want to address Black Music Appreciation Month. So when we had our little pre-conversation, you told me that you actually hadn't realized that that was a thing.
I
And
didn't
as this,
know.
yeah, and as this airs, we're in week one of Black Music Appreciation Month. Why do you think it's important to have this at all, apart from, Black History Month in February?
Yeah, so part of me, I thought about this, and part of me wants to say that there shouldn't be a need for African American Music Appreciation Month at all, precisely because the majority of music that is identified as American is rooted in black music.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yep.
part of me wants to argue that, but then on the other hand, precisely because of the nature of the way that black culture has historically been commodified and our ownership over that commodification has been erased consistently, it's important that our ownership, that our culture and contribution be recognized, and that we have a space to point out the Chuck Berrys and the Little Richards and all of those, the Ray Charleses that contributed so much that, we might forget about when we're talking about rock and roll, you know?
Right, right. Yeah, it's so interesting that you talk about that ownership piece and recognizing those who laid the groundwork. Back in Women's History Month, I made a point to really shout out Sister Rosetta Tharpe
Mm,
because hers is a name that a lot of people just A, don't know, and B, don't necessarily connect to, some of America's most American music, that rock and roll sound. And, you've already mentioned Little Richard and those folks. I want to get into how you initially learned, even from from childhood, how to define that idea of black music. Who are some of the first artists you can remember really spending time with?
oh, the music that my parents listened to. So that would be Marvin Gaye, which I would repeat 3 or 4 times, just Marvin Gaye, Marvin Gaye, Marvin Gaye. Anita Baker, I loved
Oh
from a
yes,
child. Yeah, I absolutely loved her and love her still. Um, my mother loves Bobby Womack, and by nature of sitting in the car with her, I love Bobby Womack too. I have played some of his songs to death. Um, those would just be a few that I can name offhand that inform my musical identity.
so where along the line did classical vocal training happen? How did that happen?
Oh yeah. So the honest answer is a scholarship happened,
Oh, amen, amen.
and I took myself to school. I figured if I didn't like it, I would switch out, and I loved it. But once again, it was a black voice that really captured my attention. It was Leontine Price. The final aria that she sings in Madame Butterfly,
Mm,
she is singing to her son, and she's singing about the father that her son will never know. And it's right before she's going to take her own life. And I honestly listened to that probably 80, 90 times in the one evening because I couldn't believe that that was possible with a human instrument. And I couldn't believe the sound, how much passion could be derived from an orchestra.
Now that's a really you're making me think about some really interesting things because obviously Leontine Price is one of the pillars when it comes to that intersection of race and classical music. But you're mentioning Madame Butterfly. You have a black woman singing music by an Italian composer that is supposed to take place in Japan. I wonder if that sort of cross cultural nature is something that you think about or apply to the creation of your own music these days.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. So I am very, very interested in music from various parts of the world. I choose to say vernacular music. It's hard sometimes because we're all very accustomed to world music as a term. But I'm very interested in what makes the soul of a people tick and how that's expressed musically. So I do a great deal of listening and natural incorporation. I think that there's a fine line between cultural exploration and enjoyment and appropriation.
Absolutely. Yeah. As I say, it's a thin line between collaboration and tokenization.
Oh, yeah.
But when we talk about, the global nature of music, and how these different vernaculars can mesh and blend and create something new, blackness is global and the sound of black music is global. Are there connections there specifically that you can find between, I don't know, the instrumental music of West Africa versus Afro-Cuban music versus the soul that is foundational to your experience?
Absolutely. I'm very interested in investigating the relationship between music of the African diaspora. That is something that I hope to investigate even further. I think the obvious places where we can point would be rhythm and syncopation, the use of syncopation, tonality. But I'm interested in more questions, deeper questions like the call and response. Is that something that comes from a kind of genetic memory? Or is that something that they just all happen to have in common, right? When you listen to an Afro-Cuban music, there's that call and response. When I listen to a Fela Kuti, West Africa, there's a call and response. When I go to church at home,
Right.
there's a
Yes,
call and
exactly.
response. And I'm interested in finding that meeting point and looking at where it comes from at a deeper level.
I wonder if you could go more into that phrase you just used, genetic memory. What do you mean by that, genetic memory?
The things that we okay, you know what? I'll go back. I went to Africa, the continent of Africa, for the
You went
first
to the
time. I
motherland.
went to the motherland, yes, for the first time last year, and I went to Kenya. And I was anxious, I was excited, I felt a world of feelings. And I'll never forget sitting down and having what appeared to me to be soul food. I had my
Okay.
rice, I had my collards, I had my seasoned vegetables, I had some good
You said
chicken.
seasoned.
Yes, seasoned. Um, right, and I'm sitting there and I'm eating it, and there's so much that we say, oh, it's Southern here in the U.S. Oh, this is soul food, right? But clearly, there's something that we remembered. Clearly, there's something that was passed down. So I think a similar thing happens musically. These things that we remember, that maybe it's an oral history, but at some point we just feel it. Why do I listen to Afro-Cuban music and I feel it very deeply? Why do I listen to samba and I feel it? It's related to me, you know?
Yeah, and soul. But bringing that word back around, soul music, soul food.
Exactly, exactly. And I think that there's something inside in my anatomy that remembers and recognizes my distant relative.
Yes, it sounds like you found some treasures over there in Africa, some hidden treasures,
Oh, well
if
done.
I may.
Yes.
Yeah, so since we're here, I think we might as well transition. So that, that's the name of your latest project, some hidden treasure. And I saw a video. You described the project as giving yourself permission to say the things that you weren't allowed to say. And as we kind of touched on when we spoke earlier, I thought of two different things. My mind went in two different directions when I heard you say that. A, what are those things that you felt like you weren't allowed to say? And B, what are the structures? What or who was actually determining that you weren't allowed to say those things? I think I'd like to just offer you the space to take us in whichever direction you would like to go in with that.
Sure. Um, right. So my home base is classical music, and classical music is an art um, of well, naturally of performance, but also it's an interpretive art.
Mm,
So I was always fascinated with the human instrument and wanted to maximize my knowledge and gain as much mastery over it as I could, which I'm still working on. Um, but it never occurred to me to own my own creative direction. Where in classical music, often we are contractors. We fit into a larger whole, which is a beautiful
mm,
practice. So there's the one part of wow, if I had the opportunity to create my own world, my own little my own set of compositions, what would I make? And what would I offer? What am I interested in saying? And what I found that I was interested in saying were things that I felt I was ill advised to say, right, in society, because we've been socialized out of uh, things that cause friction, for lack of a better word.
sure.
Um, so for me, my identity, which I was very much interested in expressing for the first time musically, it comes in three places, right? As a woman, as an African American, and then further as an African American woman, which implies its own set of different kind of responsibilities and socializations. So with my record, I wanted to take a shot at and saying the things that I wasn't meant to say. I wanted to acknowledge my womanhood. I wanted to speak very assertively in and around my womanhood in a way that wasn't so much suggestive as it was just firm and strong. I also wanted to speak about the nature, my experience with African American or being in relationships as an African American woman, black relationships, for lack of a better term. There's a part in Soul that I was very excited about, where I describe building a reconstruction for my partner and I, right? A new reconstruction, because what has been developed in our country now, as we are being reminded of quite often, is not entirely equal. Um, so I wanted to investigate that kind of that acknowledgement of what we often stand up against as people of color in this country, and then again as a woman, as I mentioned. Um, and then also, the natural things. You want to talk about love and heartbreak, that happens too, but that's a little
Right.
easier and a little more accepted.
Sure, sure. We and definitely on the classical side of things, and I would even say in other genres, in this past time, we've seen more equity and more attention put on music by women. Music written by women, but as it's not explored all that often, the exploration of the perspectives of Black women often falls by the wayside, and you are very vocal about not just affirming yourself as a woman but as a Black woman, a member of the African diaspora. How is how is that really different? What can you say concerning the experiences of Black women in a contemporary way and a historical way, that really gives it that status of deserving, that extra bit of attention, that extra bit of exploration?
Right. And that is a charged question. um, let's see here. I think the easiest way for me to start it would be here, speaking from the U.S. perspective. Um, Black women in this country we've raised this country quite literally. We raised the founding forefathers who we point to in our Constitution. We raised their children, their young men, their men. We nurtured, we made food, we changed diapers, we taught. My grandmother raised children from the wealthy white side of town. You know, that's what we have done. Um, so I think that that expectation in and around Black women, this kind of like superhero expectation of us remains, and that also of being the caregiver and being so strong and taking care of all others before she takes care of herself.
I wonder
Um,
if I wonder if there is a musical implication there because, again, you mentioned how in the world of classical, it's about being in service to something bigger, being in service to the composer. Do you see connections there, between, Black women raising literally and figuratively so much of America, Black women like Leontine Price spreading the joys of Western classical music to so many people, but on both sides of that conversation, the actual ownership not quite being there?
that is that is interesting. I don't know that I would have gotten there myself, but that's a really interesting question. Right? There's a huge string of mighty African American sopranos who who carried the line. That's so interesting,
I
right?
mean,
Like
the late Jesse
Jesse
Norman or
Norman,
Kathy Battle.
Kathy Battle, Martina Arroyo, naturally Miss Price, Grace Bumbry. The list is huge. Um, and I wow, I'm honestly I'm amazed by that question because I wouldn't have gone there. But that's a good one. Food for thought.
But I hope you feel ownership over what you create
Oh
in
yes.
spite of that reality.
Oh, absolutely. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to make something that was from my own mind and in service of my mind, right? Like I didn't make anything to fit into any bucket or anything that was expected of me. I made what I imagined and what was interesting to me, and that spoke to my unique reality um, as a musician and as an African American woman, as an American. Um, so yeah.
What can people expect to hear when they go and purchase some hidden treasure and sit down and just spend some time with it? What would you encourage people to sort of understand about what they're about to hear as it applies to your process? Is there a life story there? Are there experiences there that people are going to get to understand a little bit more about?
Absolutely. I'm definitely a young woman contending with what it is to be a young woman in this country, in search of love and happiness and all those things, in search of her own strength as well. I was also very interested in subtly exploring a range of African American music. And I would think, if anything, that I would hope for the listener to pay attention to is actually to have some fun with the playfulness of that exploration. I wanted to make something that hinted at a lot in a very short period of time.
But searching for, the things that you're mentioning, searching for love, searching for those, again, some hidden treasure. I love that phrase. I'm finding
Thank you.
myself saying it a lot. Searching for those things isn't always fun. I mean, in my experience anyway, more often than not, the exploration of those things, the exploration and the search for that peace can be everything but fun.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, okay. So there's two parts that I would respond to this question. The search is not fun, but it is enlivening, and it gives,
Enlivening.
yes, it lends so much and reveals so much. And I think always in hindsight, and often for me, even sometimes recent hindsight, you find that you're so much better for it. Um, there's your wisdom becomes greater, right? My understanding of the world that I live in becomes ever so slightly stronger. And to me, that is a treasure, and it's very valuable. And then also, when I was naming the album, that Some Hidden Treasure was two-part actually. So one, it was there was a wonderful young man who I loved very much, and he revealed himself to me, and everything I found out about him, I was just absolutely in awe of this beautiful person, and I called him a treasure. But then also, when I think about the music that I grew up listening to and the things that I most enjoy about music, I love discovery. I love going back time and again and finding something new. To me, that's the best part. And I think that in this culture that we live in, from like a mass culture perspective, I think that we kind of miss out on that. We want recognizable morsels all the time out of our music. But I wanted to make something that could be discovered and investigated and found anew all the time.
I'm glad to hear your positive take on finding that young man and him revealing himself to you, because it seems like every song is about heartbreak and about how men just don't treat women right, and it's so encouraging for me to hear that part of your story. What sorts of male affirmations or even validations, for lack of a better word, have you experienced as it relates to this project? Is there a if we're going back to the analogy of food, is there a little male seasoning in this dish?
Oh, you mean in terms of the composition or the creation process?
The creation process and also how it lives today in its completed form.
Yeah. Well, I work with a band of wonderful, brilliantly talented male players. Every single one of them gives so much. And this is an interesting thing to describe, but I always, when I was younger, I always imagined that if I ever had the chance to make something musical, I wanted it to be gutsy in the way that I used to say to myself, in the way that men get to make music. Which is a very complicated thing, I think, to confess now, especially as we're in this very kind of assertive, pro-feminist environment that we live in. And of course, I would define myself as fitting in that as well. But I do think that there's a ballsiness, for lack of a better word, that men get to play with more often in music than women are recognized for making. So I wanted to make something with grit and something that wasn't always pleasing, that lived from the gut.
Not always polite, even.
That's the way. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I would argue that for male seasoning, and then let's see, in its afterlife, now that it lives out in the world, I think that remains to be seen. It's still pretty new out in the world. It'll just be like, I guess, 3 months at this time.
Yeah.
So I'll say TBD for that one.
Sure. And the band that you've described, I suppose those are the Excursions. How did you meet them? Were they a fully formed band when you began collaborating?
No. I just called them. I collected them and I called them the Excursion. They went along with me with that.
And where did that name come from?
Once again, the Some Hidden Treasure, the search. I love discovery, and I don't even know exactly what I'll do next. I want to find out what I am going to do next. And that's where I want my music to live, this kind of sense of exploration. And I would love to create an environment of trust with my audiences to just go there with me.
Yeah.
And the band as well.
So back to that initial question about the project, giving yourself permission to say the things that you didn't always feel like you were allowed to say. Can you point us to a specific song, a specific track that really embodies that energy, that attitude of going against the grain and affirming yourself in the way that you've decided to, musically speaking?
Absolutely. If I were to point to one, I would say it would be the song called Soul, which is probably no surprise considering that I've repeatedly talked about soul music.
Yeah.
Soul is I guess a four-part song with three distinct structures. I wanted to describe the fragmented reality of being human. I wouldn't even say of being a woman. Sometimes I feel this way, sometimes I feel that way. I wanted to articulate that musically in a creative and once again gutsy kind of way. And then further, I wanted to specify that experience as coming from the woman's perspective in a relationship. So I wanted there to be a moment of seduction, right? And I wanted that to be very clear musically. I wanted to articulate that. I wanted to hear it from the bass line. In the guitar, I wanted to definitely hear it in my vocal performance. Then I wanted it to once again be very affirmative. There's a kind of African kind of like respiration, I'll say, that I do, which I was very excited about in a rhythmic capacity. And those are all there to kind of point to this kind of bold affirmative statement from the woman's perspective. Then I also wanted there to be a moment of, hey, I need space. I need me time. I need to be me. Then I once again, I wanted to serenade. So we return to the seduction, and then finally we end in the serenade, where I attempt to describe my understanding of my partner's experience in this world as, in this case, I was speaking to a partner who's an African American man,
Mm-hmm.
and describing the challenges of that reality, but the beauty that we hold together in that partnership.
Oh my goodness, that's really incredible for me to hear. And as we wrap up here, and I listen to your words, I can't help but to think back again to that concept of the appreciation of Black music. I think about your appreciating the Black folks around you, and again the Black music that you grew up with. What would be your way of selling this project to people who might not know how to appreciate this as a Black music that stands equally beside the classically infused Black compositions of Florence Price, William Grant Still, folks who are interested in some of the artists you mentioned earlier, like Anita Baker, or folks that live in the world of Fela Kuti and those people. How do you convince someone that a project like this sits equally and deserves equal appreciation, not just during Black Music Appreciation Month, but in the world of music in general?
I would introduce them gently. With my song that has strings on it.
Oh,
And strings
okay.
and harp, right? A gentle coaxing. But then also, I think when I think about myself as an artist and what drives me as an artist, from a pretty young age, and in terms of my introduction to classical music, I was very, I wanted to be a part of that lineage. I just wanted to be a part of the line. I just wanted to accept the torch and pass it to the next one. That's something that's very important to me. And I have taken the time, I have done my work as a vocalist, as a soprano. And I think that it is very important that we, classical music especially, is trending towards being a repertory practice. But I think that it's important to remember that we can continue to take steps forward. And so when I describe my music, and especially this being my first effort, my first set of original compositions, I think that we need to give artists permission to explore and to find things out. We don't. That's not so much the musical landscape that we live in right now, which I find troubling for creativity. How are we supposed to find where else we can go if if we continue to make only what is expected of us? So when making a statement, making the case for my record and my work, I would make the case for exploration and the case for finding something new and finding out who I am, but also contributing to the line in my own way. That's what I'm interested in.
And if that's your message to the consumers of the art, what's your message to the creators of the art? Because I'm sure there are countless women, black women, who again feel like that have been siphoned, or feel like there are things that they can't explore or that won't fit into the musical or other artistic platforms or rooms that they sit in. What is your message to the creators?
Just make it.
Just make it.
Just make it.
Wow.
I still don't know exactly where this contribution is going to go. I know what I'd like to do next, but I'm still not even entirely sure. But I'm proud I made it. I do see it as a contribution. It's an offering to this lineage that's all around us. You know.
Yeah. So what is next? What's on your plate? What's on your desk?
Oh man, I can tell you what I want to do. I want to find out what makes the African diaspora tick. I want to investigate that very badly. I want to find out about all the brown and black cultures of the world, or as many as I can introduce myself to and be introduced to. And I want to find out how we express ourselves through song.
Wow. Okay. Final question before I let you go. To try to pull this around full circle. You described the principal area of your music as soul, and then we found connections with soul food. What are some of the? You've made me hungry now. So what's your favorite when you think of soul food? What do you think of? You might inspire my menu tonight. Cornbread. Not the Jiffy, but the homemade.
I mean, I eat Jiffy too.
Yeah, me too. The Jiffy is quick, it's easy, it's sweet, and yeah, there you are.
It's good. What else is there? There's anything that my parents make. That's always soul food. But I'm thinking about rice, collard greens, which I've already managed to describe in this interview. What else am I thinking of? Naturally, some whiting, some good.
The fish.
Yes,
yeah.
Some good fried fish.
Okay, I think you've given me what I need to throw something together this evening. Alicia, for folks who want to learn more about you, want to check out your latest project, how can they do that?
Please visit my website. It's aliciawaller.com. And please do follow me on social media, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook at Alicia en Vivo, which means Alicia Live in Spanish.
Alicia, you yourself are a hidden treasure, hopefully a treasure that is going to be unhidden here in the coming weeks and months. So thanks you so much for being on TRILLOQUY, and good luck for everything that's coming in the future.
Thank you, Garrett. I just have to say I really so admire what you're doing. So it's awesome. So I'm so honored to be a part of it. No cloud above me, got a braid in my hair. He said I was so pretty, so pretty, so pretty. Daybreak above me, not a hint of despair, and there's a light.
Yes, thank you once again to Alicia Waller. It was so great to talk with her. We'll have to have her back on the podcast to give some more of her hot takes and that sort of thing. But speaking of hot takes, it's time for movement 4, the TRILLOQUY. So
hey.
Me or you?
I'll go first this time because, like during the first movement we were talking, I wondered aloud, is it too late because all of these organizations and even, sports teams are coming out and saying,
Yeah.
it has recently come to our attention that we have been behaving poorly.
Even the
recently.
NFL.
Right. So, and that's what I wanted to, that's kind of what I wanted to touch on. Roger Goodell made his release online. And my first question is, how much are they paying him? Because his living room looked like
first
mine.
First of all, we're
With wood
musicians. So
paneling.
who is Roger Goodell, and what sport does he play?
Roger Goodell is the commissioner of the NFL.
Oh, right. Okay.
Okay, and so he does this video where he's talking about, we should have listened, we should have this and that. And all I can do is go, man, you got wood paneling and a couch that looks like you found it on the street.
Look at your privilege showing.
And and I'm thinking, man, you're the commissioner of the NFL. You should go buy some stuff.
What did you think about what he had to say, though?
Well, this is the point, because I was reading the reactions on Twitter, and there are so many people, famous and everyday people alike, are saying, you had a shot. You had your chance. Screw you. We're not buying it.
Yeah.
Okay, so my TRILLOQUY is more of a challenge. I'm throwing down a gauntlet here. The first major orchestra or chamber ensemble that announces an all-black season next year wins.
I'll put on my mask and I'll travel to go see. But they would never. They're not going to do it. They're not going to do it.
Let's see it. If they are serious and they want to do more than the bare minimum, which is to jump online and go, boy, we sure are sorry. Then show it.
You getting in your feelings. You hitting the mic.
It's these really handsome new.
It's interesting that you bring up the NFL, and that, because my TRILLOQUY had went along those lines, more with the ensembles and especially the schools, the conservatories. It's really, there are all sorts of emotions connected, to these days. What's really been pissing me off is the fact that hashtag Black Lives Matter all of a sudden isn't some political statement that I'm getting in trouble for saying publicly.
Isn't it interesting?
Or whatever. It's all of a sudden this sort of the analogy that was presented to me when I was talking this with somebody else was the blood of the lamb over your front door, so the death angel passes over you. So the cancel culture angel passes over you if on your website you have Black Lives Matter.
That's the bare minimum, man.
And there are even the organizations that feel like they're taking the next step. There was this one school, I believe. I would call them out if I knew. I don't feel like going in my phone and remembering who it was. But there was this one organization that had this petition going, and they were promising to put diverse composers on all of their concerts. Okay, so when I went and read, the fine print of the little petition, they were talking about members of the LGBTQIA community, women, composers of color, blah blah blah. So all of a sudden, it's not putting Black Lives Matter on your website or whatever is one thing, but it's another thing to sort of push forward this initiative, and you are still sort of backseating and sidelining the black people.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like if you
that's why I said a black season.
Right. I feel like if you aren't directly trying to engage black communities, and that is both with the black composers and the music that your organization can present that will engage black communities in your neighborhood. If you're not doing that, you're not even doing the work. So, moving forward here, I'm really taking a look, and I said this I've been on a lot of digital panels. Mm-hmm. Everybody's talking about it all of a sudden, which is, again, kind of my point. I feel like I've really been dedicated to this work, and I'm glad that it's becoming a thing, but we have to make sure that it's authentic and not just for clicks, not just for your ticket sales or whatever. So I guess my TRILLOQUY this week kind of mirrors yours. But I'll just go a step further and say we are definitely watching. We know the orchestras that recorded, the William Grant Still symphonies, the Florence Price symphonies, or whatever, and we know the ones who are trying to jump on the bandwagon now. We know the individuals. I know the individuals who have always explored these conversations and been doing this work, and I know the individuals who are just kind of jumping on now. So it is what it is.
First orchestra to announce an all-black season next year wins.
They're not going to do it. They're not going to do it, Scott.
Why you gotta
Prove me wrong.
There you go.
I need one of you orchestras, one of you CEOs or whatever, to prove me wrong. But I don't think I'll be wrong because y'all don't have the nuts, y'all don't have the vagina to program a full black season. Anyway, until next time.